While as new relationships form and characters are evolving, everyone realizes they need to grow up in an episode that really capitalizes the season as a whole. Hey guys, Cameron for Girl Meets World, Season 3, Episode 12, Girl Meets Bear, and I really didn't know what to think of this episode. I'm going to tell you why. Mainly because the way the Disney Channel has been, I think, promoting this show lately. I really have disliked the way they're promoting the show as of late. I've always really disliked their promos, but especially for this season, they've made every episode seem like it was a soap opera and that there was going to be something ridiculous happening, and that really was not the case for this episode. And like I said, I really didn't know how this episode was going to be going into it. They tried to be very hush-hush about this episode as well, and I'm honestly very happy with that, because I'm not going to lie to you guys, when this episode initially started, I was not a fan of it, but as it went on, this by far turned out to be one of the best episodes of the season, and maybe one of the best episodes the show has given us, and I think one of those episodes that's one of the closest to Boy Meets World we've had. I really love this episode. I think this was an incredibly insightful look at growing up and changing, and I mean, that's really been, I think, the theme of the season as a whole. You know, everyone's really discovering who they are, and they're moving past their old selves and things like that, but let's just get into this episode. There's a lot to talk about, a lot of really great scenes here, and I really think everyone gave an amazing performance here, and even though Smackle was absent from this episode, she really didn't need to be here, so that's my only thing, is that Smackle was not here, but she really didn't need to be in this episode, because she really wasn't a big part of this story in the sense of how, you know, like, say, Riley, Maya, Zay, Lucas, and Farkle were. But let's just get into this episode, because there's a lot to talk about. So we start off, and like I said, the first, I'd say, like, 10 minutes of this episode, I really was not a fan of. I was like, oh boy, this is gonna be one of those episodes where it's just gonna be silly, and I'm not gonna like it that much, and it's gonna be ridiculous, and it's not really gonna have much of a message. I really thought this episode was gonna be very cheesy and very ridiculous, because we start off, and right away, Maya is excited about this taco truck, I guess, because this taco truck is coming to New York, and everyone's excited about it. Corey's freaking out about it. She is too, and you know, she really wants to get to these tacos. Riley doesn't see what the big deal of it all is. You know, she doesn't fully understand it, and she's more concerned about this bear that she has and things like that. So she always has this bear by her, and Maya and her, they're going to get tacos, but then in the middle of them getting tacos, Riley ends up losing her bear, and at this point, I'm like, why should I care so much that Riley lost her bear? I mean, that's what everyone was thinking. Why does it matter so much that Riley lost her bear? The thing is, the bear ends up being more of a symbolism. We'll get into more of that, but at this point, like I said, I really wasn't into the episode that much. Everyone's then kind of frantically searching for the bear. Lucas, Farkle, and Zay come by because Maya invited them to get tacos and go to the taco truck and everything. They're excited about it, but once they find out that everyone's more concerned about finding Riley's bear, I love the way that Farkle and Lucas both tried to leave, and Lucas talked about science, and Farkle talked about sports, and Maya asked, why'd you guys switch characters? That was a funny line, and I will admit, this episode was pretty hilarious. I thought this episode definitely was not short on laughs at all, definitely really good stuff, and I really did enjoy a lot of the laughs in here. I also love how in this episode, randomly Zay just keeps bringing up the whole cookie situation. I just thought it made sense why this episode came after the last one, obviously, because if it would have come before, like, if the episode would have been a couple episodes before, I think we would have forgotten about it, but because the episode was last week, it made the joke that much funnier. So I'm actually not upset that this episode was supposed to be way after, you know, that episode was supposed to be way before Ski Lodge and was actually last week. It makes more sense why they did that in that context. But basically, you can see that they really don't want to be there, but Riley then talks about really what this bear symbolizes for her, because I guess there was this time when Riley and Maya, you know, Maya was over her house, and they were playing with the bear, and Augie ended up chewing off the bear's head because he wanted to spend more time with them, and obviously they rejected him because they were younger, and Riley's kind of held a grudge against him since, and this basically gets everyone to go on the trail of looking for the bear. Meanwhile, Maya is very frantic because she wants to get this taco truck. This taco truck obviously it has bobbleheads, and she's freaking out about that and everything, which I thought was interesting to see. I definitely really did like that overall, her freaking out. I thought, like I said, Sabrina Carpenter always does a great job in this kind of role. We then get this random scene with Zay where he comes up to her, talks to her about being an outsider and things like that. She doesn't really know what he's talking about, but it starts to make sense. You know, once we get there, that's when things get interesting. But then we cut to commercial. We realize that everyone's going to be searching for the bear for the entire episode. And at this point, like I said, I really wasn't that into the episode. I'm like, I don't really know if this is going to be that interesting. I'm kind of bored right now. I don't know why we had this episode. It felt very much like a season 1 episode. Not saying season 1 episodes are bad. I just feel the show can do a lot better than that. You know, it was kind of like last week's episode where it was a bit corny. But once we came back from that commercial break and the episode continued from there, after that, I'm like, this is a completely different episode. And I really realized that I misjudged the episode, because from there, I loved everything about this episode. I think everything they did after that, they really symbolized what they were trying to do here. They really got the message across very well, and I definitely really did love that, because everyone's really searching for the bear, and everyone's kind of gone their separate ways. You know, everyone's kind of gone to different groups. We have, first of all, Corey and Augie. Augie's, you know, talking about the bear and everything, and he ends up finding this necklace, and the necklace is not any necklace. It happens to be the baseball diamond that Corey found from Alan, if you remember, in season 4 Boy Meets World, the episode Kid Gloves, where he ended up losing that necklace that Alan gave to him, and he, reminisces about it. And that I thought was a really good scene. I like the way that that was done. I'm like, all right, I like what the episode is trying to show here. It's trying to show that he's held on to these things, and this is an episode. What this scene's really trying to show us is that everyone that has something sentimental to them for a reason, everything that has ever been brought to someone has some sort of a story for why they hold on to it. You know, everyone has those things they just hold on to for sentimental value, whether it's because, oh, you know, my, say, like, your dying grandmother gave it to you, or someone gave it to you and they died, or someone gave it to you when you were a baby, or someone gave it to you when you were sick. And, for example, Riley got the bear given to her when she was sick and she needed a friend, and, you know, Maya wasn't available, I guess. She was sick, she was basically bedridden, she couldn't really go anywhere, and she was trying to make friends with the bear, and I just thought that was kind of sweet. From there, I'm like, okay, now I get what this episode's really trying to do. However, it wasn't until a conversation with Farkle and Topanga that's when I really got into this episode, because Farkle and Topanga are looking through this scrapbook, and they're talking about the bear and everything, and Farkle sees Topanga's old looks of her, you know, the hippie look and everything, and he talks about what that means to her, and she asks him if he has his past selves, and he basically says that they're behind him, and he's realizing to move on for them. But I like the question that Farkle asked her, because he asked her, is this really the right person to be? Am I really the right, you know, is this really who I am now? You know, am I just playing a character? Am I just going through a weird stage? Or is this really who I am? And I like that Topanga says that we always have that old, you know, that old self of ours, but they become more of something in a scrapbook than they are of who we once were. And that's very much true. I think everyone really goes through that stage where they start off high school as someone and they end as someone else. Now, Farkle's someone who started middle school as someone and ended middle school as someone else. You know, Farkle's someone that has kind of matured in that way, because he's realized, you know, who he really was, and he wasn't really happy with who he was. And I like the scene where he says, you know, they've helped him become the person he is today, which that scene I thought was really well done, because that's true. Everyone has to move on from their past selves, and I definitely really did like that. But Josh then comes in, and we see that he now is there to give everyone his laundry and things like that, which I thought was interesting to watch, where the Matthews are now doing his laundry, and he's obviously happy that they're doing that. But then we get into this scene where he talks about college, and he's kind of, you know, scatterminded with college. He is kind of overwhelmed by the parties and just the way that everything's done differently, and the thing he says to them is honestly kind of scary. I think one of the biggest parts of this episode is the quote that Josh says, which is when he says that high school is the last time you are you before you're forced to grow up. And that line is honestly kind of scary, because I'll tell you why. I mean, I'm someone that is going to be a senior in high school, and after that, you know, I have to go to college and everything, and it's just kind of scary to think about that you're basically forced to grow up and you're no longer considered this kid. You now have to be this adult, and that's something that Josh isn't necessarily sure if he's ready for, and that's something I thought was very interesting that we saw here. I like seeing this side of Josh where he's very tentative into do I really want to move on and go into this next chapter of my life? Did I do this too quickly? Did I, is this really what I can do? But the thing is, he can't really question it. This is how his life is, and he kind of just has to deal with it. And that is one of the reasons why the show is as mature as it is. And that's one of the things I really do love at the show, is when they really get into the nitty-gritty of life. And that's one of the great aspects of this episode, is just showing the fact that everyone's forced to grow up. And we then get this scene with Riley and Lucas, who at first I thought weren't acting like a couple, but luckily they were acting like a couple in this episode, and I did like that. And basically, they're talking about, which, by the way, I forgot to say last week, the episode that we had last week was actually supposed to be before Ski Lodge, so that's why they weren't acting like a couple at all. But in this one, they were, and Riley asked Lucas if he ever had something of sentimental value to him. And he talks about, I think it was something that Pappy Joe gave to him. I thought that was a nice scene, and the way that he realized that, was a sentimental value, and it was this thing that they thought was gold, basically. He thought that it was real gold, and Zay ended up putting it in his mouth. Turned out it was just gold bubblegum, but he didn't really think of it as, something that, it didn't really let him down, because it was still something that his Pappy Joe gave to him. And that's something else the episode's really trying to show, is that, be grateful for what you have. Appreciate things for who gave it to you, not what they are. And I think that's definitely a very important statement to live by. So many times nowadays we're so concerned about what are we going to get, what is it. It's more concern, what's more important is who's giving it to you, and it's the thought that counts. People always say that, and I thought that again is a very good statement to live by, and I really did love that. But also throughout this episode, one of the things I really did like is Maya in this episode, because Maya's kind of the outsider in this episode. She's constantly being haunted by these visions of her and Riley as children, and at first I'm like, what are we really trying to show here? At first I thought it was just trying to show something random, that Maya wasn't interested in what was going on, but I think it's really trying to show that Maya really doesn't have that innocent part of herself anymore. She's kind of grown up too fast, and she really I think is kind of afraid to have that childlike sense of her. She doesn't really have that part of her right now. She's so focused on these tacos that she doesn't really remember those memories of her and Riley. She doesn't really thinking about those. That's what Riley's really thinking about. It's one of those, it's a symbolism of their friendship. It's something that really has brought these two together, and that's something I thought we saw very well here. I very much like that, the way they did that. I mean, it turned something that could have been very contrived and turned into something a lot more meaningful, and I really did love that. But then we get back to the bear, because I really do want to talk about the bear. Like I said, initially, I didn't give a shit that Riley lost her bear. I'm like, who cares? It's just a bear. But then, when you really think about it, the bear really is supposed to be symbolism. It's not so much that Riley lost her bear, it's more that this is something that Riley has her entire life, and that she simply just doesn't need anymore, because she's grown up, and basically, Maya comes to this conclusion that if the bear's gone, it's probably supposed to be. This is the point where Riley's supposed to move on. Certain things we like as a child, we just don't really have interest in anymore, and that happens to a lot of people, and it's not a bad thing. It's just a sign of growing up, and that's something that they really aren't ready for. We've known this since Girl Meets High School, that they really weren't ready to grow up, but now they're being forced to grow up. And now that Riley has someone like Lucas, and she has friends, and she has a boyfriend, she doesn't really need the bear in her life anymore. And the bear kind of has gone in its own separate ways, which I thought was interesting to see. And I like that basically everyone realized they didn't need to look for this bear, because she doesn't really need anymore, which I thought was very interesting that we saw. And then we get this scene where Riley and Lucas, they come back and they talk about how they didn't find the bear, but they found something more important, and we realize that they did in fact bring Maya tacos, which I thought was kind of a fun scene. Even the fact that she got the bobblehead, I thought was a lot of fun to watch. I definitely really did like that. But then we get to the whole thing that's going on with Zay and Maya, because everyone was saying, oh my god, there's going to be a big Zay scene, oh my god, it's going to shake up Josh Aya, and no, that's not really what I got from this. I didn't get the sense that Zay has a crush on Maya, which I think he might actually. I think he kind of always has. Ever since Girl Meets Texas, I've kind of always thought he has a crush on Maya. But I think he might have one, but I think it's more supposed to be of a friendship, because he tells Maya that he doesn't want her to be the third wheel. You know, he doesn't want her to go on a date with Riley and Lucas and her kind of just scrunched in the middle. Everyone's been in that awkward situation at some point in their life, and he really does not want that for her. He wants to be able to go to the movies and her to feel comfortable sitting next to him, and for them to kind of just be friends and be able to go together as friends. When Riley and Lucas go to something, Maya is probably going to be there. She has someone to tag along with, and of course, you know, Farkle is Smackle, so he can't really do it, but Zay is someone that can, and I thought it was just a very sweet scene. I really did love that. It shows how nice of a guy Zay is. It really shows how far he's come now. I think it's really shown how far he's found his way into the group, because he had this scene with Maya before where he talked about the way she looked at him and how, you know, she didn't even know him, but she let him into the group, and I think what he was really trying to say is the fact that Maya just kind of needed a friend. Maya needed someone to, you know, to feel like the outsider with, and that's something that Zay wants her to do. He doesn't want her to feel like the outsider. He wants them to kind of feel like outsiders together, and I thought that was definitely a very nice scene, and it's also the scene that makes Josh realize that maybe he will find something good in college, even though he has this weird roommate that he really does not like, you know, that has this weird name. I can't think of the name right now, but even though he has this roommate, maybe he will find something good about it, and he decides that he is going to go back to college and venture out and try to make new friends, and I thought that was just a really great scene, and I love the way the last scene was done. Very reminiscent of Girl Meets the Bay window, you know, where they changed the window because they realized that it just needed to be changed after all this time, and you know, we get this scene where Maya sees Riley and Maya, little Riley and Maya, they leave the door, and it's basically supposed to be that they're growing up. That part of themselves is gone, but they're blossoming, they're growing up. It's not a bad thing, they're just evolving, and that's what happens to everyone. They turn into this, you know, other self, and they just grow up, and they become a little bit more mature, a little bit wiser, and that's exactly what's happening to everyone. Seamlessly before their eyes, they're growing up, and I love the way that just seems like Topanga and Corey, with her saying like she didn't want to see Riley grow up and that's why she wanted to lose her bear. I thought that was interesting to see. I definitely really did love that, but I think it was just a great way to end the episode. I think it was a great way to just symbolize the message the episode was trying to get overall, and really just show how great this episode ended up being. So like I said, this episode went from something that was very cliche and very ridiculous to something that was much more meaningful and much more important. And really, like I said, I think this is probably one of the most important messages that Girl Meets World has done. I mean, yeah, last week's was important, but this one's even more important because a lot of people they reach that point where they're just like, holy shit, I'm growing up and I don't really know if this is what I want to do and I don't really know if it's time for me. I mean, I've gone through that. I really have. I've gone through this time where I'm like, am I just growing up too fast? Am I too mature? I mean, it's something that I think we all really think of. Is there such a thing as being too mature? And yeah, there kind of is. Maya was the one I think that was kind of being a little bit too mature. She was someone that didn't really want to admit, I think, that she had the childlike part of her there, and that Riley kind of did. And I thought that was interesting to see. What the episode's trying to say is not to abandon that childlike part of yourself. It's to say to hold on to that, but as you're holding on to that, also don't be afraid to evolve into a better person. You know, as you can keep that childlike part of yourself, but don't be afraid to grow up. And that's something I like the episode really did very well. I think it was a very good message. I think it was a very effective message, and I think it really does symbolize what the show's trying to do. I mean, it's trying to show that these characters are growing up. You know, these are not the same characters we knew in Season 1. They are changing. They are, you know, this is really good character development, and I really did like that. And I like that they made notes of Riley and Lucas together. I thought they were going to do this thing where we know they're together, they just don't really mention it. But no, the show did mention it, and I really did like that. And what I like is that they're not Corey and Topanga. They're not all over each other, because that was Corey and Topanga. That's not how Riley and Lucas are. They're different than that. And I think the episode represented that very well. And I like what Josh did here as well. I like the scene with him and Maya where Zay said, you know, he knows what's going to happen between Josh and Maya, but he doesn't really want... I think Zay, like I said, wants something to happen between him and Maya someday. Maya does not like him like that. He clearly, I think, likes her like that, but she doesn't like him like that. But he does want them to have some sort of a bond. You know, he wants to have some sort of a relationship. He doesn't just want Maya to be an outsider. He doesn't want himself to be an outsider, and what he, you know, the best thing to do is to be friends and to always have each other's backs. And I think that's something that Maya is going to live up to. She is going to hold on to her end of the deal, and I really love the way that was done. But overall, guys, I really did love this episode overall. Now we have to wait another month or so. I think the show doesn't come back till the end of September. I don't know why they do this bullshit. I do understand why. I think they just want to stretch things out. They want to stretch out the season a little bit more. We're on episode 12, and we're doing, I think, 21 episodes this year, so I think they want to stretch it out a little bit, which I completely understand. I just don't really like it when they have those breaks. Elena of Avalor is doing the same thing. I never know when that show is on because it's on one week and then it's not on, so that's even more confusing. But anyway, let me know what you guys saw of this episode. What do you think of the way the episode was done? What did you think of the beginning? Like I said, I was not a huge fan of the beginning, but then once I realized what they were trying to do and like what the tacos represented and what the bear represented, that was all really symbolism. That's something I think the show did very well. I also really love the flashback. Also, if you didn't know, young Augie was actually August Maturo's little brother, Ocean Maturo, which I just thought was very clever the way they did that. I definitely really did like that because it totally seemed like young Augie. Well, that's because it was his brother, and that completely made sense why. But anyways, guys, most of you guys thought of this episode. I really do love this episode overall. I think it's, like I said, one of the most mature ones they've done. One of the most, I think, kind of bittersweet ones they've done, but it really is one of the most realistic episodes they've done as well. And that's it for my review. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for a movie review, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.